"Let me save your little business," she said, basking in our parents' applause while I played the role of the grateful failure. At exactly 2:47 in the afternoon, I signed the transfer papers. 5 minutes later, the doorbell rang. 4 men in dark suits marched into Mom's foyer and flashed SEC badges in my sister's face. That was the moment my family realized their useless child had spent 3 years building a perfect trap for financial fraud. My name is Dylan Bond, and for the last 27 years, my family has looked at me the way one looks at a stained rug in an otherwise pristine living room. I sat at the far end of the long mahogany dining table, my hands folded in my lap, listening to the rhythmic scrape of silver knives against china. This was the Sunday ritual in our house in Maplewood, a town just outside Cleveland where the lawns were manicured to within an inch of their lives and failure was treated like a contagious disease. Across from me sat my sister, Olivia. She was 3 years older, sharper, hungrier, and currently wearing a diamond tennis bracelet that probably cost more than my entire legitimate income for the last fiscal year. Olivia was a director of strategy at a mid-sized hedge fund, possessing an MBA and a predatory smile that my parents mistook for ambition. Today, that smile was directed entirely at me. "It is just the logical step, Dylan," Olivia said, her voice dripping with that sickeningly sweet tone she used when she wanted to manipulate someone. She reached for her wine glass, the diamonds on her wrist catching the afternoon light. "We have all seen the numbers. Northline Insight Studio is a cute idea. Really, it is creative, but let us be honest, it is drowning." She paused to let the words sink in. Drowning. I kept my expression neutral, practicing the blank stare I had perfected over 3 years of undercover preparation. "I thought we were doing okay," I said softly, intentionally making my voice sound small. "We have clients. You have a few email addresses and a website." My brother, Ryan, chimed in from my left. He was cutting his steak with unnecessary aggression. Ryan was the family cheerleader, always ready to amplify whatever narrative Olivia was spinning. "Come on, Dill. You are playing shop. Olivia understands Wall Street. You understand, well, you are good with your little laptop in the bedroom." My father, Mark Bond, cleared his throat at the head of the table. He did not look at me. He rarely did when money was the topic of conversation. He preferred to look at the chandelier, as if the crystals held the answers to why his second son was such a disappointment. "Your brother is right," Dad said, his voice a low rumble of authority. "You have always been the artistic one, Dylan, sanguine, a bit nonlinear. Business requires a spine. It requires a killer instinct. You are just not cut out for the grind of keeping a company afloat. We just want you to be safe," my mother, Linda, added. She reached out and patted my hand, a gesture that felt less like comfort and more like she was consoling a terminal patient. "Let Olivia take the burden off your shoulders. She can restructure the debt, handle the legal filings. You can go back to freelancing. You were so much happier when you were just doing those little design projects, remember?" I remembered perfectly. I remembered every condescending remark. Every time they introduced Olivia as the executive and me as the one who is still figuring things out. I looked down at the documents spread out on the table between the salad bowl and the bread basket. It was a transfer of membership interest agreement. Standard boilerplate, but Olivia's personal lawyer had tightened the screws. It transferred 100% of the ownership, assets, and intellectual property of Northline Insight Studio LLC from Dylan Bond to Olivia Bond. "I do not know," I said, hesitating just enough to sell the performance. I picked up the pen, twirling it between my fingers. "I built Northline from zero. It feels like giving away my baby." Olivia laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Oh, sweetie, it is not a baby. It is a liability. I sat up all night looking at your books. The cash flow is erratic. The client retention rate is abysmal. Honestly, Dylan, it has almost no future. I am doing this to save your credit score. Not because I expect to make a fortune. It will take a professional hand to even break even." I watched her eyes. They were not looking at me. They were darting to the signature line on the paper. She was lying. I knew she was lying because I had designed the book specifically to fool her. Northline Insight Studio was a shell, a ghost, a mirror maze. On the surface, the cooked books I had accidentally let her see showed a struggling company that was sitting on a massive, unrealized contract with a government subcontractor. A contract that did not actually exist, but looked compelling enough to borrow 7 figures against. Olivia did not see a liability. She saw a quick flip. She saw a way to leverage my company's clean incorporation history to secure a massive loan she had no intention of servicing properly, washing the money through her own channels. She thought she was stealing a golden goose from a distracted toddler. She had no idea she was handcuffing herself to a corpse. "You think it has no future?" I asked, repeating her words slowly. "None," Olivia said firmly, "but I can absorb the loss. I have the portfolio to balance it out. You do not?" "It is a sacrifice, really," Mom said, looking at Olivia with adoring eyes. "Olivia is taking on so much risk just to help you. Dylan, you should be thanking her." "Yes," I said. The word tasted like ash, but I swallowed it. "Thank you, Olivia, for saving my small business." "It is what family does," Olivia said, pushing the paper an inch closer to me. "We look out for each other." I uncapped the pen. The ink was black, permanent. I glanced at the grandfather clock in the hallway, though I did not need to. I had an internal clock ticking down in my head. I checked my wristwatch to be sure. It was 2:47 in the afternoon. The timing was crucial. The SEC team led by Angela Rhodes was on a strict schedule. We had coordinated this down to the minute. If I signed too early, Olivia might have time to read the fine print in the appendix where I had legally disclosed the lack of real assets, a clause she would never read because she was too arrogant to think I could outsmart her. If I signed too late, the agents would arrive before the transfer was legally binding, and Olivia could claim she had nothing to do with the company. It had to be now. I lowered the pen to the paper. The scratching sound seemed deafening in the quiet dining room. Dylan Bond. I signed my name with a flourish, dating it clearly. "There," I said, exhaling a breath I had been holding for 3 years. "It is yours. Northline is yours." Olivia snatched the paper away almost before the ink was dry. She tried to hide her eagerness, but her hand moved too fast. She slid the document into a leather folder next to her plate and snapped it shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "Smart choice," Ryan said, raising his wine glass. "To Olivia, for always being the one to step up." "To Olivia," Dad said, beaming. "To Olivia," Mom echoed. I did not raise my glass. I just kept my hands folded. "So," Olivia said, her voice instantly changing. The sweet, concerned sister was gone. The boss was back. "Now that is settled, Dylan, I am going to need all the login credentials for the bank accounts and the cloud servers by tonight. I am bringing in my own accounting team tomorrow morning. We are going to gut the expense structure. No offense, but your spending on market research was laughable." "No offense taken," I said. "And the client list," she added, cutting a piece of potato. "I want to reach out to them personally, reassure them that management has changed, that things are going to be professional now. I am sure they will be very interested to hear from you," I said. My mother frowned. Sensing a shift in the atmosphere but unable to place it, she looked at me, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You are taking this surprisingly well. Dylan, I thought you would make a scene. You usually get so emotional when we try to give you advice." "I have done a lot of growing up lately," I said. "Good," Dad grunted. "It is about time. Maybe now you can get a real job. Ryan says his firm is looking for data entry clerks. It is entry level. But if you keep your head down, maybe in 5 or 10 years you could move up to junior analyst." "I will keep that in mind," I said. I looked at Olivia again. She was texting under the table, probably messaging her banker contact that the asset was secured. She looked triumphant. She looked untouchable. She sat there in her silk blouse and diamond bracelet, believing she had just pulled off the heist of the century against her own brother. She had no idea that the ink on the contract she just put in her bag was the final nail in her coffin. I felt a vibration in my pocket, one single buzz. That was the signal. "You know," I said, breaking the silence. My voice was steady, devoid of the tremor they were used to hearing when I defended myself. "I really am grateful. Olivia, I mean that." Olivia looked up from her phone, her eyebrows raised in mild annoyance. "We covered this. Dylan, you are welcome. Now let us eat before the beef gets cold." "No," I said, leaning forward slightly. "I mean, I am grateful you were willing to put it in writing, that you were willing to take full legal responsibility. Not everyone would do that." Something in my tone made Ryan pause with his fork halfway to his mouth. The air in the room grew heavier, thicker. The casual contempt that usually flowed freely around the table seemed to snag on something sharp. "Why are you saying it like that?" Olivia asked. Her eyes narrowed. She was smart. I had never denied that. Her instincts were sharp, but her greed dulled them. Now that the paper was signed, the greed was sated, and the instincts were waking up. "Like what?" I asked innocently. "Like you know something I do not," she said. "I know a lot of things you do not," I said. "But that is why you are the business genius, right? You checked the books, you did the due diligence, you said you saw everything." "I did," she snapped. "Then there is nothing to worry about," I said. I glanced at my watch again. 2:52. "Dylan," Mom said warningly, do not ruin a nice family moment with your sarcasm." "I am not being sarcastic. Mom," I said. "I am just admiring Olivia's confidence. It takes a lot of courage to take over a ship when you do not know what is in the cargo hold." Olivia put her fork down. The metal clattered against the plate. "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said, pushing my chair back slowly, "that I think I left my phone in the other room, and I am expecting a call, a job offer, actually." "A job offer?" Ryan scoffed. "From who? Another one of your imaginary clients?" "Something like that," I said. I stood up. The transfer of power was complete. The legal entity known as Northline Insight Studio, along with its fraudulent history, its fabricated revenue streams, and its radioactive trail of intent to defraud lenders, now belonged entirely to Olivia Bond. I was free, and she was the target. As I walked toward the archway leading to the living room, I could feel their eyes on my back. They were annoyed. They thought I was being petulant. They thought I was a sore loser walking away to lick his wounds. "Don't be long," Mom called out. "We are serving dessert in 10 minutes. Cherry pie." "I will be right back," I said. I would not miss the next part for the world. I stepped into the living room, out of their sight, and the mask dropped. The submissive slouch vanished from my shoulders. I pulled my phone from my pocket. It was exactly the time I had promised Angela. The first phase was over. The trap was sprung. Now, all I had to do was open the door. The silence in the living room was a sharp contrast to the clatter of silverware and self-congratulatory chatter I had just left behind in the dining room. I stood by the large bay window that overlooked the manicured front lawn, my phone pressing cool and hard against my ear. Through the glass, the street was empty, bathed in the lazy, golden light of a Sunday afternoon in suburbia. It was the kind of neighborhood where nothing bad ever happened, where the biggest scandal was a lawn that went unmowed for 2 weeks or a garbage bin left out past noon. I needed to be absolutely certain before I answered the call. I needed to hear it one more time, not for the legal record, that was already secured in ink, but for my own peace of mind. I took a half step back toward the dining room archway, just enough to catch Olivia's eye. She was busy sliding the transfer documents into her sleek leather portfolio, treating the papers with a reverence she never showed people. She looked up, her expression a mix of annoyance and triumph. "Just to be absolutely clear," I called out, keeping my voice level, stripping it of any emotion. "From this second forward, legally speaking, everything is yours? The client list, the intellectual property, the outstanding liabilities? The Northline name is 100% yours?" Olivia snapped the lock on her bag. The sound was crisp, like a judge's gavel. Dylan, please. My lawyer is thorough. There are no loopholes. I own it all. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Though, let us be honest, it is mostly ugly right now. Good, I whispered, more to myself than to her. I just wanted to be sure. I turned back to the window and swiped my thumb across the screen to answer the call. This is Bond, I said. Ms. Bond. The voice on the other end was calm, professional, and dry as dust. It was a voice that did not make small talk. It was the voice of the United States government. This is Director Rhodes. Are you currently with the subject? Angela Rhodes, Division of Enforcement. We had spent hours over the last 6 months in nondescript conference rooms, mapping out the architecture of a financial implosion. But hearing her voice here, in my mother's house, felt surreal. It was like bringing a loaded weapon to a tea party. I am, I replied, keeping my voice low. We just finished dessert. The papers are signed. The transfer is complete. She has physical possession of the corporate records. There was a pause on the line, followed by a sound that might have been a dry, humorless chuckle. I have been in this division for 20 years. Ms. Bond, I have seen Ponzi schemes, insider trading rings, and corporate embezzlement that would make your head spin. But I have to say, it is rare to see someone voluntarily sign their name to a death warrant like this. She really believes she bought a legitimate consultancy? She believes she bought a distressed asset she can flip, I said, watching a squirrel run across the power line outside. She thinks she is smarter than the market. Greed usually does that to people, Angela said. We are 2 minutes out. We have a team of 4. I need you to keep the subject and the witnesses on the premises for at least another 5 to 10 minutes. Do not let them leave. Do not let her make any calls that might trigger a data wipe. Is that understood? They are not going anywhere, I said. Trust me, they are too busy celebrating. Stay on the line until we pull up, or hang up and go back in? Your choice, but act natural. Angela advised. I will go back in, I said. See you soon, Director. I ended the call and slipped the phone into my pocket. My hands were steady. That surprised me. I had expected to be shaking, expected to feel some pang of sisterly guilt or a waver in my resolve. But there was nothing, just a cold, empty clarity. I had spent 3 years being the family punchline, absorbing their insults like a sponge, all while building a cage around them. Now that the door was shut, I didn't feel malicious. I just felt efficient. I walked back into the dining room. The atmosphere had shifted slightly. The euphoria of the signing had settled into a comfortable, smug satisfaction. My mother was cutting the cherry pie, the red filling spilling out onto the white china plates in a way that looked strangely violent. Ryan was pouring more wine. Who was that? Mom asked without looking up. She slid a slice of pie toward my empty seat. You have been getting a lot of calls lately for someone who just admitted their career is a dead end. I sat down and picked up my fork. The metal felt heavy. Just old work, I said, stabbing into the crust. Tying up loose ends. It is all over now. Well, thank God for that, Dad grunted. Maybe now we can have a dinner without you checking your email every 5 minutes hoping for a miracle. Olivia was watching me. She was holding her wine glass by the stem, swirling the red liquid. Her eyes narrowed. She had the instincts of a shark. Even if she lacked the foresight, she could sense blood in the water. She just didn't realize it was her own. You are acting strange, Olivia said. It wasn't a question. Am I? I asked, taking a bite of the pie. It was too sweet. I just gave away my company. I think I'm allowed to be a little introspective. It is not that, she said, leaning forward. The diamonds on her wrist clicked against the table edge. You are too calm. Usually, you would be sulking. You would be making some passive-aggressive comment about how we do not understand your artistic vision. But today, you are just taking it. It makes me wonder. Wonder what? I met her gaze. I didn't blink. What aren't you telling us, Dylan? She asked sharply. Is there a lawsuit pending? Is there some debt you conveniently forgot to list in the disclosure schedules? Because if there is, my lawyers will eat you alive. You know that, right? The irony was so thick I could almost taste it. She was threatening me with lawyers while federal agents were currently turning onto our street. There is no lawsuit, Olivia, I said softly, and everything is in the schedules. You said you read them. I did read them, she snapped. Then you know exactly what you bought, I said. Ryan laughed, shaking his head. Ignore him. Liv, he is just trying to get under your skin. It is his last little power play before he goes back to being a nobody. Let him have his moment of mystery. It is all he has got. I am not playing, I said, turning to look at my brother. I am just waiting. Waiting for what? Mom asked. Sensing the tension spiking, she put the pie server down with a clatter. Stop it, both of you. Olivia just did a wonderful thing for this family. Dylan, stop being so ungrateful and cryptic. If you have something to say it. I looked at the clock on the wall. The second hand swept past the 12. I do not have anything to say, I said. But I think everything is going to make sense very soon. You are exhausting. Olivia sighed, rolling her eyes. She reached for her bag again. I am going to call the bank. I want to get the line of credit moving first thing Monday morning. I need to make sure the transfer of the collateral is flagged in their system. I wouldn't do that if I were you, I said. Olivia froze, her hand halfway to her phone. Excuse me? I just mean, I said, shrugging. It is Sunday. Relax. Enjoy the victory lap. Why rush into the paperwork? Because that is how successful people stay successful, Dylan, she sneered. We do not take days off. She pulled her phone out. I took a sip of my water. I counted down in my head. 5, 4, 3. The sound of a heavy car door slamming outside cut through the room. Then another. Then 2 more. Dad frowned, looking toward the hallway. Who is that? Are we expecting company? Linda? No, Mom said, looking confused. Maybe it is the neighbors? Olivia ignored the noise, tapping on her screen. I am calling the VP of lending. He owes me a favor. Ding dong. The doorbell didn't just ring. It resonated. It was a sharp, authoritative sound that seemed to slice the heated air of the dining room in half. It wasn't the polite ring of a neighbor returning a borrowed cup of sugar. It was a demand. Silence fell over the table. Forks stopped moving. Olivia paused, her thumb hovering over the call button. I will get it, Mom said, starting to push her chair back. But she looked hesitant. The energy in the house had changed instantly. The safety of our suburban fortress had been breached by something unknown. I picked up my coffee cup. It was cold, but I held it like a shield. I looked at my sister, who was staring at the hallway with a furrowed brow. The first crack of genuine worry appearing in her perfectly applied foundation. Actually, I said, my voice cutting clearly through the quiet room. Everyone looked at me. I think it is Olivia's turn on the stage. Mom? Linda reached the heavy oak door before the chimes had even faded into the silence of the hallway. I stayed in my seat at the dining table, my hands resting calmly on either side of my cold coffee cup, listening to the heavy click of the deadbolt sliding back. Can I help you? My mother asked. Her voice carried a tremor of confusion, the kind that comes when the suburban bubble is pierced by something that does not belong. Good afternoon. Ma'am? A female voice replied. It was Angela Rhodes. Even without seeing her, I could picture the sharp cut of her blazer and the terrifying neutrality of her expression. We are looking for Olivia Bond. Is she on the premises? Olivia? Mom stammered. Yes, she is having dinner. Who are you? We need to come in, ma'am. There was the sound of leather wallets flipping open, a synchronized, practiced movement. Special Agent Rhodes, U.S., Securities and Exchange Commission. These are my colleagues. The air in the dining room seemed to be sucked out through a vent. Mark Bond dropped his napkin. It fluttered to the floor like a white flag of surrender. Ryan's mouth hung slightly open, a piece of steak forgotten on his fork, but it was Olivia who captured my full attention. The color did not just drain from her face, it vanished, leaving her skin the color of old parchment. The arrogant tilt of her chin collapsed. She looked at the hallway, then at her leather portfolio, and then, for a split second, at me. "Mark?" Mom called out, her voice shrill now. "Mark, come here. There are people here. They say they are from the government." My father stood up, his chair scraping violently against the hardwood floor. He marched toward the hallway with the bluster of a man who believes his property taxes buy him immunity from inconvenience. Olivia followed him, her movements jerky and stiff. Ryan and I brought up the rear. In the foyer, 4 figures stood in a semicircle. They wore suits that were not fashionable, just expensive and severe, charcoal and navy, designed to intimidate. Angela Rhodes stood in the center, her badge still visible in her hand. "What is the meaning of this?" Dad demanded, puffing out his chest. "You cannot just barge into a private residence on a Sunday. Do you have any idea who we are?" "We know exactly who you are, Mr. Bond," Angela said. She did not raise her voice. She did not have to. "And we are not here for you. We are here for her." She pointed a finger directly at Olivia. Olivia took a step back, bumping into the side table where Mom kept a vase of fresh lilies. The water sloshed, threatening to spill. "Me?" Olivia squeaked. "There must be a mistake. I work for Sentinel Capital. If this is about a trade, you should be contacting our compliance officer. I have not done anything." "This is not about Sentinel Capital, Ms. Bond," Angela said. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a thick file folder. "We are executing a search warrant related to an investigation into securities fraud, falsification of financial records, and attempted bank fraud involving an entity known as Northline Insight Studio." The name hung in the air, heavy and toxic. "Northline?" Dad frowned, looking back at me and then at Olivia. That is Dylan's thing. That is the little company they were just talking about." "Currently owned and operated by Olivia Bond," Angela corrected him, her eyes locking onto my sister. "According to the filing you just electronically submitted to the state registry 14 minutes ago. You are the sole member and manager. Is that correct?" Olivia looked like a trapped animal. Her eyes darted wildly around the room. "No, I mean, yes, legally. But I just signed the papers today, 10 minutes ago. I have nothing to do with how that company was run before today. That is his." She pointed a manicured finger at me. "That is my brother's company. If there is fraud, he did it. I was just trying to help him out. I am the victim here." "That is not what the evidence suggests," Angela said coolly. "We have been monitoring the traffic from your work email for 3 months. Ms. Bond, we have logs of you accessing Northline's fabricated ledgers. We have drafts of loan applications to Union Crest Bank where you inflated those already fake numbers by another 300%. And we have the transfer of interest agreement you just put in your bag, which explicitly states you have conducted full due diligence and accept all historical liabilities." "I did not know," Olivia screamed, her voice cracking. "He tricked me. Dylan, tell them. Tell them this is your mess." I stepped forward. I did not look at my parents. I looked straight at Angela. "She is right about one thing," I said. My voice was steady, the clearest thing in the room. "I did create the books." "Dylan!" Mom gasped, clutching her chest. She looked at me with a mixture of horror and vindication. "I knew it. I knew you were in trouble. Oh, God. Mark. He has dragged his sister into his crimes." "Quiet, please," Angela commanded, holding up a hand. She nodded at me. "Go on, Mr. Bond." I turned to face my family. Northline Insight Studio is not a consulting firm. It never was. It does not have clients. It does not have revenue. It is a shell company, a honeypot. It was designed specifically to look attractive to someone who wanted to use fake assets to secure high-value loans. The silence that followed was absolute. You could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. A trap?" Ryan whispered, blinking rapidly. "You mean it is fake?" Completely, I said. Every contract in that binder Olivia scrutinized so carefully. Fake, every bank statement. Mocked up, the intellectual property. Non-existent. It has zero value. The only reason anyone would want to acquire it is if they plan to use that clean paper trail to deceive a lender. Linda slumped against the wall, sliding down until she hit the floor. She did not faint, but her legs simply refused to hold the weight of the reality crashing down on her. Dad stared at me, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. "You set her up," Dad breathed. "You set your own sister up." "But why is the SEC here?" Ryan asked, his voice trembling. "If the company is fake, then there is no money, so no crime, right?" Angela stepped in, her tone shifting from investigator to lecturer. "Creating a shell company is not illegal. Young man, creating fantasy financial projections is not even illegal, provided you do not show them to anyone. But the moment Ms. Bond here took ownership and used those figures to initiate a loan application, which our surveillance confirms she did at 8 this morning, pending the signature of the transfer, it became wire fraud and securities fraud. She attempted to leverage non-existent assets to defraud a federally insured bank." "I did not send the application yet," Olivia cried. "It is still in my drafts." "Intent to defraud," another agent spoke up for the first time, his voice deep and gravelly. "And you solicited investors last week using Northline's projected growth. We have the emails." Olivia's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. She looked at the bag in her hand, the bag containing the poisonous contract she had fought so hard to get me to sign. She dropped it as if it were burning. "Why?" Mom whispered from the floor, tears streaming down her face. She looked at me, not with love, but with fear. "Why would you do this, Dylan?" 3 years ago, I said. I walked over to the side table and picked up a coaster, turning it over in my hands. 3 years ago, I landed my first real contract, a small tech firm called Ridgeway Systems. It was $50,000. It was going to be my start. I looked at Olivia. She was shaking her head violently, silently begging me to stop. "You intercepted the email chain," I said to her. "You saw the opportunity. You created a fake email address that looked like mine. You sent them new payment instructions. You routed the deposit to an offshore account, and then you ghosted them. When they called me, angry and confused, I had no idea what had happened." "That is a lie," Olivia hissed. "You are delusional." "I told you all," I continued, sweeping my gaze over my parents. "I came to this house. I sat at that dining table and I told you Olivia stole my client. And what did you say? Dad?" Mark Bond looked away. "You said I was jealous." I answered for him. "You said I was being petty. You said Olivia was a professional and I should stop making up stories to cover for my own incompetence. We didn't think," Dad stammered. "You didn't think I was worth believing," I said. "That night, I realized 2 things. First, that my sister is a criminal who will steal anything that isn't nailed down if she thinks she can get away with it. And second, that you would never believe me unless I caught her in a way that was undeniable, unless I caught her in a box she built for herself. So you spent 3 years?" Ryan looked at me with a strange expression. It was not admiration, but it was certainly awe. "You spent 3 years building a fake company just to wait for her to steal it?" "I knew she could not resist," I said. "Olivia does not build things. She acquires them. I just made sure the only thing available for her to acquire was a bomb." "You are sick," Olivia spat. Her fear was momentarily replaced by pure venomous hatred. "You are actually sick. You destroyed my life over $50,000? "No," I said calmly. "I stopped you before you could destroy someone else's life for $5 million. That was the loan amount you put in the draft, wasn't it? $5 million from Union Crest Bank, using my name as the historical founder." Angela cleared her throat. "Ms. Bond, we have a warrant to seize all electronic devices and physical documents related to Northline Insight Studio. That includes the phone in your hand and the laptop we know is in your car. We would prefer your cooperation. but we will get them either way. Olivia clutched her phone to her chest. She looked at Dad. Daddy, do something. Call Mr. Henderson. Tell them to get out. Mark Bond looked at the agents, then at the terrified face of his golden child, and finally at me. For the first time in his life, he seemed to realize that his shouting would not make the problem go away. The badge on Angela's belt was real. The handcuffs on the belt of the agent behind her were real. This is a federal investigation, Mr. Bond, Angela said, noticing his hesitation. Obstruction is a felony. I suggest you step aside. Mark took a half step back. It was a small movement, but it was the most significant thing he had ever done in my presence. He was abandoning the fight. It is a lie, Olivia screamed, realizing her protector was standing down. It is all a lie. He planted the files. He hacked my computer. We have forensic logs that prove otherwise. Ms. Bond, Angela said. We have recordings of you discussing the creative accounting needed to maximize the valuation. Recordings provided by a cooperating witness. Olivia froze. She turned her head slowly toward me. Recordings? Every dinner, I said softly. Every phone call where you gave me advice on how to hide losses. Every time you told me that ethics were for poor people. I have it all. Olivia, it is all on a secure server at the SEC field office. Linda let out a low moan of despair. Ryan looked at me as if I were a stranger, a dangerous alien who had replaced his brother. You wore a wire? Ryan asked. In our house? I did what I had to do, I said. All right, that is enough, Angela said, stepping forward. Ms. Bond, please hand over your phone. We are going to need you to come down to the office for a preliminary interview. You are not under arrest at this exact moment, but I strongly advise you not to leave the jurisdiction. Olivia's hands trembled so violently she dropped the phone. It hit the floor with a crack. One of the agents stepped forward and bagged it immediately, treating it like the smoking gun it was. As the agents ushered Olivia toward the door, not in handcuffs yet, but surrounded in a way that made it clear she was no longer free, she stopped and looked back at me. Her face was a mask of ruined mascara and utter disbelief. I am your sister, she whispered. I know, I said. That is why I gave you exactly what you asked for. 3 years ago, the air in my lungs felt different. It was lighter. I was lighter. I was 24 years old, sitting in a coffee shop with a cracked screen on my laptop and a digital contract on the display that made me feel like I had finally conquered the world. Ridgeway Systems. It was a mid-sized tech firm needing a complete overhaul of their user experience interface. The contract value was $50,000. To Olivia, $50,000 was a rounding error. It was a bonus she would complain about receiving because the tax bracket hit was too high. But to me, it was oxygen. It was proof that I did not need the family safety net. It was rent for a year. It was independence. I remember calling home. I remember the naive excitement bubbling in my chest. I told Mom. I told Dad. And, fatally, I told Olivia. I even sent her the draft scope of work because she asked to see it. Claiming she wanted to be proud of her little brother, she said the terms looked loose and offered to look over the invoicing structure. I sent her the contact details for the accounts payable department at Ridgeway, believing she was actually trying to help me professionalize my operation. 2 weeks later, I received a call from Sarah, the project lead at Ridgeway. Dylan, she said, sounding confused. We got the updated invoice from your partner. I just want to confirm the wire instructions before I send this through. The bank name changed from Chase to Fidelity. Is that correct? I froze. I was sitting in my bedroom, the same bedroom where Ryan mocked me for working, and I felt the blood drop out of my head. My partner? I asked. Sarah, I do not have a partner. I am a sole proprietor. Oh, Sarah said. There was the sound of typing on her end. That is weird. I have an email here from an Olivia Bond, CCing a generic admin address. The signature says, Strategic Billing Partner for Northline Design. She said you were focusing on the creative side, and she handles the financials now. She reissued the invoice with a 5% rush fee added. My hand gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. It was not just the theft. It was the audacity. She had not even bothered to change her last name. She assumed that because we shared a surname, the client would just accept the transition. And she was right. They had. "Do not send that wire," I told Sarah, my voice shaking in a way I hated. "I will handle this." I drove to my parents' house that night. I did not go in screaming. I went in with the emails printed out. I had the paper trail. I had the timestamps. I had the proof that Olivia had attempted to divert $50,000 of my hard-earned money into an account I did not recognize. We sat in the living room, the same living room where, 3 years later, the SEC would come knocking. But back then, the power dynamic was entirely different. I laid the papers on the coffee table. I explained what happened. I watched Olivia pick up the pages, scan them, and then let out a sigh that sounded incredibly bored. "Honestly, Dylan," she said, tossing the papers back down, "you are making a mountain out of a molehill. I was trying to consolidate the billing. You have no idea how to manage cash flow. I was going to hold the money in a high-yield account and disperse it to you as a salary so you wouldn't blow it all on new software or whatever it is you do." "You told them you were my partner," I said, my voice rising. "You gave them your bank account number. You did not ask me. That is fraud. Olivia, that is theft." I turned to my parents. "She tried to steal my contract." I waited for the outrage. I waited for Mark Bond, the man who preached about integrity at every Rotary Club meeting, to slam his fist on the table. I waited for my mother to look at her daughter with disappointment. Instead, Dad took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Dylan," he said, his tone weary, "watch your language. Theft is a very serious accusation." "It is the truth," I insisted. "Look at the emails." "I think you are misinterpreting Olivia's intentions," Mom said softly. "She has an MBA, honey. She runs multi-million-dollar portfolios. Why would she need your $50,000? It does not make sense." "She is just trying to help you," Ryan added from the armchair, not even looking up from his phone. "You should probably thank her for handling the admin work. You are terrible at math." "She put her bank account on the invoice," I shouted. "To protect you," Olivia snapped, "because I knew if you got that lump sum, you would do something stupid. I was acting as a custodian. God, you are so ungrateful. This is why you will never make it in the real world. You treat help like an attack." "You are just jealous," Mom said. The words hung there. They were worse than the theft. "Jealous?" I whispered. "You have always been jealous of Olivia's success," Mom continued, her voice gaining a sharp, defensive edge. "You see her doing well, and you want to tear her down. You invent these little dramas because you cannot stand that she is the one carrying the family name forward." I looked at them. I looked at the 3 people who were supposed to be my foundation. They were looking back at me with a mix of pity and annoyance. They had chosen their reality. In their world, Olivia was the golden child who could do no wrong, and I was the hysterical, incompetent artist who needed to be managed. Facts did not matter. Evidence did not matter. The narrative was set in stone. I realized then that if I sued her, they would testify against me. They would say I authorized it. They would say I was unstable. I would lose the client. I would lose the money. And I would lose my family. "Okay," I said. The word felt like swallowing a razor blade. "Okay?" Olivia asked, raising an eyebrow. "I will tell the client it was a miscommunication," I said. "I will tell them to wire the money to the account you sent. You can manage it for me." Olivia smiled. It was the smile of a predator who realizes the prey has stopped running. "That is a smart decision. Dylan, I will transfer you a stipend next month." I walked out of that house, and I sat in my car for 2 hours. I did not cry. I wanted to, but the anger was too hot. It burned the tears away before they could form. That $50,000 was gone. I knew I would never see more than a fraction of it. Olivia would find administrative fees and management costs to chip away at it until nothing was left. But in that silence, sitting in the dark driveway, Something inside me shifted. The part of me that craved their approval died. It shriveled up and turned into ash, and in its place, something cold and sharp began to grow. I realized I had a specific kind of clarity. I had looked at those emails and seen the fraud instantly. I saw the slight alteration in the domain name. I saw the discrepancy in the Swift codes. I saw the pattern of manipulation. If I could see it in my own sister, could I see it elsewhere? I did not go to a bar. I did not go home to sleep. I drove to a 24-hour bookstore in downtown Cleveland. I bought 3 books on forensic accounting, one on the psychology of white-collar criminals, and a study guide for the Certified Fraud Examiner exam. For the next 6 months, I lived a double life. To my family, I was the defeated failure they expected me to be. I took their advice. I acted meek. I let Olivia manage a few more small invoices, letting her steal a few $100s here and there just to keep her confident, to keep her believing I was totally under her control. I complained about money constantly. I wore the same fraying shirts to dinner. I played the role of the starving artist perfectly. But at night, I was sharpening a blade. I devoured every case study I could find. Enron, WorldCom, Madoff. I learned that fraud is rarely complex. It is just bold. It relies on the victim's trust and the perpetrator's arrogance. I learned about shell companies. I learned about layering, integration, and round-tripping. I learned how to spot a doctored PDF by checking the metadata. I learned how to trace an IP address through a proxy server. I took the certification exams under a pseudonym, paying cash. I passed in the top 1%. I landed a junior analyst position at a boutique forensic firm in Chicago, working remotely. My first case involved a CFO who was siphoning money from a charity to pay for his mistress's condo. I found the trail in 4 hours. My boss said I had an unnatural instinct for deceit. I told him I learned from the best. That was when the idea for Northline Insight Studio began to form. I knew Olivia. I knew she was not satisfied with stealing crumbs from me. She wanted the whole cake. She was climbing higher at her fund, taking bigger risks. I heard her bragging at Thanksgiving about creative leverage and aggressive restructuring. She was getting reckless. I knew that if I just waited, she would eventually make a mistake, but I did not want to wait for her to hurt a stranger. I wanted her to hurt me, again, but this time, on my terms. I needed a trap. I created Northline. I incorporated it legitimately. I built a website that used all the buzzwords Olivia loved: synergy, paradigm shift, data-driven deliverables. I filled the cloud server with files that looked like proprietary algorithms, but were actually just gibberish code I wrote to look impressive to a non-programmer. Then came the financials. This was my masterpiece. I created a set of books that showed a company that was operationally chaotic, but revenue-rich. I fabricated invoices from companies that sounded real, but were untraceable. I created a paper trail of a massive government subcontract that was pending final signature. I made the company look like a goldmine that was being managed by an idiot. I made it look exactly like the kind of thing Olivia would think she could steal and improve. I spent 2 years tending to this garden of lies. I paid the annual registration fees. I filed 0 income tax returns to the IRS to stay legal, while keeping a separate, internal set of fake books on my laptop, the ones I knew Olivia would eventually snoop for. Every Sunday dinner, I watered the seeds. "I am so overwhelmed," I would say, poking at my mashed potatoes. "The paperwork is piling up. I think I might be losing track of who owes me money." I would watch Olivia's eyes light up. "I just do not understand tax law." I would sigh a month later. "I think I might have underreported my income. I'm scared to look at the bank account." I saw the greed germinate in her. I saw her calculating. She looked at me and saw a weak, stupid brother who was sitting on a pile of cash he did not deserve. It was excruciating to wait. There were times I wanted to scream. There were times, like when Dad told me I should be more like Olivia, that I almost threw up from the rage. But I held it in. I channeled it into the documentation. Every insult became a new line item in the fake ledger. Every dismissive look became a new falsified contract. I was not just building a fake company, I was building a mirror. I was building something that would reflect her own avarice back at her so brightly she would be blinded by it. I knew the moment would come. I knew she would eventually need a quick infusion of capital or a new asset to leverage for her own career goals. I just had to be the easiest target in the room. And when she finally approached me, asking to see my books just to help out, I handed her the laptop with the fake password I knew she had guessed years ago. I went to the bathroom, looked at myself in the mirror, and whispered, "Got you." Construction is an art form, especially when you are building a house of cards designed to look like a fortress. Northline Insight Studio was, on paper, a masterpiece of corporate sterility. I registered the LLC in Delaware, paying the expedited filing fee to ensure the paperwork was crisp and official. I obtained an employer identification number from the IRS. I opened a business checking account at a regional bank, depositing just enough of my own savings to keep it from being flagged as dormant. Legally, Northline was as real as General Electric. Functionally, it was a ghost. But a ghost needs a haunt. I knew Olivia would not respect a company that existed solely on a laptop, so I rented a physical space. It was a closet-sized office in a co-working building on the edge of the flats in Cleveland. It cost me $400 a month. It had exposed brick, a single mid-century modern desk I bought at a thrift store, and a very expensive-looking ergonomic chair. I went there once a week, usually on Tuesdays, to take photos. I would post them on the company LinkedIn page with captions like, "Late nights crunching data for the Q3 forecast," or "Strategizing the next big pivot." In reality, I was usually sitting in that chair eating a sandwich and reading comic books, waiting for the light to hit the brick wall just right for the photo. Meanwhile, my real life was happening 10 blocks away, on the 22nd floor of the Key Tower. That was where Arcadia Forensic Consulting had its headquarters. I had been hired there 2 years prior. First as a junior analyst, then quickly promoted to senior investigator. My name was on the door of a real office. I was leading teams that hunted down embezzlers and money launderers. I was making 6 figures, driving a leased Audi that I parked 2 streets away from my parents' house whenever I visited, so they would only see my beat-up Honda Civic. To my family, Dylan Bond was a struggling freelancer trying to make a consulting studio work. To the rest of the world, I was a rising star in financial crime investigation. Keeping these 2 worlds separate was exhausting, but the exhaustion served the narrative. When I showed up to Sunday dinner with dark circles under my eyes, my mother assumed it was the stress of failure. In reality, it was the stress of hunting down a Ponzi scheme operator in Florida. "You look pale, Dylan," Mom would say, ladling gravy over my potatoes. "Are you eating enough? I bet you are skipping meals to save money again." "I am fine, Mom," I would mumble, staring at my plate. The market is tough right now. I had a client cancel a retainer agreement yesterday, said they are moving budget to AI. This was the bait. I scattered these little crumbs of disaster at every meal. "Another cancellation?" Dad would ask, shaking his head. "That is the 3rd one this month. You have no stability. Son, no pipeline." "I am trying," I would say, injecting a note of desperate defensiveness into my voice. "I have this big contract pending with the state. If it lands, I will be set for a year. But the paperwork, the compliance forms are a nightmare. I think I filled out the vendor request wrong." I watched Olivia from the corner of my eye. She was cutting her chicken with precise surgical strokes. Her ears perked up at the words "big contract" and "state." "What kind of contract?" she asked casually, not looking up. "Data analysis for urban planning," I lied. "Traffic patterns, emergency response times. It is a 6-figure scope, but they need audited financials to approve the vendor status, and my books are a mess." "A mess how?" she asked. "I do not know." I sighed, rubbing my temples. "I have invoices everywhere. I think I might have billed some clients twice, and others not at all. I have $70,000 in receivables that I just haven't had time to chase down." The fork stopped halfway to her mouth. $70,000 in uncollected revenue. To a shark like Olivia, Leaving money on the table was a cardinal sin. It was physically painful for her to hear. "You have $70,000 outstanding?" she asked, her voice tight. "Dylan, that is negligence. That is not bad luck. That is stupidity." "I am a creative. Olivia," I snapped, playing my part. "I am good at the data, not the accounting. I hate the spreadsheets. I just want to do the work." "You are going to go bankrupt with a full order book," Ryan sneered. Classic Dylan. I reached into my pocket and silently tapped the screen of my phone. The voice memo app was already running. I had started recording these dinners 3 months ago. "I know," I said, letting my shoulders slump. "I am drowning. I really am. I have this asset, this company, that could be worth something, but I'm driving it into the ground because I do not know how to run the back office." I pulled my laptop out of my bag. "Look at this. Just look at this projection. If I could just get the cash flow stabilized, the valuation would be insane." I slid the laptop across the table. This was the moment. The numbers on the screen were a work of art. I had spent weeks crafting them. I used the same techniques I saw fraudsters use in my real job at Arcadia. I inflated the projected revenue based on verbal commitments. I listed intellectual property assets, proprietary algorithms, that sounded revolutionary but were actually just basic Excel macros. But the genius was in the flaws. I made the expenses look chaotic. I made the tax liabilities look frighteningly disorganized. I created a picture of a gold mine that was being managed by a toddler. Olivia put down her fork and pulled the laptop closer. She scrolled. Her eyes narrowed. She tapped a key. She scrolled again. I saw the calculation happening in real time behind her eyes. She saw the pending government contract, valued at $250,000. She saw the proprietary IP valued at another $500,000, and she saw the chaotic expense reports that she knew she could slash in a heartbeat. She thought, he is sitting on $1 million business, and he is letting it die because he is too lazy to hire an accountant. "My God," she whispered. "Dylan, these margins. If you actually streamlined your server costs and fired your freelance graphic designer, you would be netting 40%. "I do not know how to do that," I whined. "I am scared to fire people. I am scared to negotiate with the server hosts." "You are pathetic," Dad said, shaking his head. "Your sister finds the profit in 5 minutes. You have been running this for 2 years and you are losing money." "I should just quit," I said, dropping my head into my hands. "I should just shut it down. Let the contracts lapse. Go work at Starbucks." "No," Olivia said sharply. The room went silent. "Do not shut it down," she said, her voice softer now, more calculating. "That would be wasteful. The IP alone is worth saving." "I cannot handle it, Olivia," I said. "I am not like you. I do not have the killer instinct. I am tired of the collections calls. I am tired of the stress." I looked up at her, making my eyes wide and pleading. I wish I had someone who could just take the business side away from me. I would act as a consultant, maybe do the creative work, but I need to get my name off the liabilities. I need out of the debt. I saw the hook sink in. "Well," Olivia said, leaning back and taking a sip of wine, "I suppose, if you are really serious about walking away, we could work something out." "What do you mean?" Mom asked, hopeful. "I mean," Olivia said, looking at her manicured nails, "I could take over the LLC. I could absorb the liabilities, which are messy. Dylan, very messy. And in exchange, I would take full ownership. You would be free. No more debt. No more vendor lawsuits." "You would do that?" I asked. "But it is a mess. Why would you want it?" "Because I can fix it," she said arrogantly. "And because we are family. I hate to see you embarrass us like this. If I take it over, I can restructure it. Maybe sell it in a year or 2. You would walk away with nothing, obviously, because the company has no liquid value right now, but you would have your freedom." "I do not care about the money," I lied. "I just want the peace." "Then let me help you," she said. The smile she gave me was the smile of a wolf telling a sheep that the cave is warm and safe. The next day, her lawyer sent over the draft agreement. It was aggressive. It was predatory. It transferred everything: assets, accounts, IP, and all future revenue streams to Olivia Bond. It explicitly stated that Dylan Bond was indemnified from future debts, but surrendered all rights to the company. She thought she was stripping me bare. She thought she was taking a diamond from a child. I read the contract in my real office at Arcadia, laughing softly as I marked up the sections. I made sure to leave the clause about full assumption of historical liabilities exactly as it was. I even added a disclosure schedule in the appendix, Section 14, Paragraph B, that listed potential discrepancies in historical revenue recognition. It was vague enough that she would ignore it, but specific enough that a federal prosecutor would look at it and say, "He warned her." I brought the revised contract to the house 3 days later. "I just want to be sure," I said to the family, holding the pen but not signing. "This means you are the owner. Olivia, if the state audits the company, they talk to you, not me." "That is the point, Dylan," she said, rolling her eyes. "I am the shield. I am protecting you from your own incompetence. Just sign the damn paper." "Okay," I said. "Thank you, really." I looked at my parents. They were beaming. "This is the best thing for you," Mom said. "Olivia is going to turn that little hobby of yours into a real business." "She sure is," I said. I knew that the moment I signed, I would trigger the next phase of the plan. I knew that Olivia was already talking to bankers. I knew she had already drafted loan applications using the fake numbers I had fed her. I knew that she was about to walk into a federal trap with her eyes wide open, blinded by the glare of fool's gold. I signed the preliminary intent document that night, promising to sign the final transfer at Sunday dinner the following week. Back in my car, I played back the recording of the dinner. "Olivia, I will take full ownership. I can fix it. You will walk away with nothing." "Dad, you are pathetic." "Mom, Olivia is going to turn it into a real business." I saved the file as Evidence Item 042, Coercion and Intent, MP3, and uploaded it to the secure server I shared with Angela Rhodes at the SEC. The stage was set. The actors knew their lines. Even if they didn't know the genre of the play had changed from a family drama to a crime thriller, the path from being a disgruntled brother to a federal informant was not a straight line. It was a calculated curve, navigated through the sterile corridors of high finance investigation. My entry into the world of the Securities and Exchange Commission did not happen because I called a hotline. It happened because I was good at my job. At Arcadia Forensic Consulting, I had built a reputation for spotting the ghost in the machine, the subtle anomalies in ledger entries that signaled embezzlement. 6 months before the Sunday dinner, I was assigned to assist on a sprawling case involving a mid-sized equity firm in Chicago that was inflating its asset sheets. That was where I met Angela Rhodes. Angela was not what I expected. She did not look like a television cop. She looked like a high-powered auditor who had seen enough of human nature to be permanently unimpressed. We were in a conference room on the 14th floor of the federal building, surrounded by boxes of seized hard drives. I had just walked her team through a complex layering scheme the target had used to hide debt. "You have a sharp eye. Mr. Bond," she had said, closing the file. "Most analysts miss the discrepancy in the vendor timestamps. You caught it in 10 minutes. I have had practice spotting people who lie about money." I had replied. The words came out before I could check them. Angela had paused, her pen hovering over her notepad. She looked at me, really looked at me, with that unnerving intensity that made you feel like she was reading your bank statement through your forehead. Is that so? That was the moment. I could have walked away. I could have kept Northline Insight Studio as a private, petty revenge project, a way to waste Olivia's time and maybe humiliate her at a family gathering. But I looked at Angela, and I saw a weapon. I saw the difference between a family spat and a federal case. I asked for a private meeting. 2 days later, I sat across from her in a smaller, soundproofed room. I laid out the Northline model, I explained the shell company. I explained the inflated metrics, the fabricated intellectual property, and the bait I had been laying for my sister. Angela listened without blinking. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. "Let me get this straight," she said, her voice dry. "You have built a honeypot. You created a fraudulent entity, and now you are waiting for your sister to acquire it so she can use it to defraud a bank. And you want us to be there when she does." "Essentially," I said. "Mr. Bond, we are the SEC, not your personal hit squad," she said. "We do not settle domestic disputes, and frankly, this sounds dangerously close to entrapment. If you are inducing her to commit a crime she would not otherwise commit, that is inadmissible. It is illegal." "It is not entrapment," I countered, pulling a flash drive from my pocket. "It is a stress test, and she has already failed it before." I plugged the drive into her laptop. I showed her the Ridgeway Systems evidence. I showed her the emails from 3 years ago where Olivia had impersonated me, diverted funds, and attempted to steal a client. I showed her the timeline. "She has a predicate," I said, using the legal term I had learned during my late-night study sessions. "She has a history of opportunistic fraud. I am not pushing her to cook the books. Director Rhodes, I am not telling her to lie to the bank. I am simply presenting her with a company that has bad books. A moral person would look at Northline's financials, see the mess, and run away, or they would fix it legally. The only person who would look at Northline and see an opportunity to secure a $5 million loan is someone who is already predisposed to committing fraud." Angela clicked through the Ridgeway emails. She saw the pattern. She saw the malice. "She is a predator," I continued. "She works at a legitimate fund now, but she is reckless. She is looking for a shortcut. If she does not use Northline, she will use a real company. She will use real investors' money, and when she crashes, she will take innocent people down with her. I am offering you a controlled detonation. Let her blow herself up in a simulator before she does it in the real world." Angela stayed silent for a long time. Then she looked up. "You have recordings?" "Hours of them," I said. "Dinner conversations, phone calls. I have her on tape advising me to hide liabilities. I have her on tape asking if the auditors really check the offshore accounts." "Legally obtained?" "Ohio is a one-party consent state," I said. "I was a participant in every conversation." Angela nodded slowly. The skepticism in her eyes was replaced by the cold calculation of a prosecutor. She saw the potential. It was a textbook case of familial financial abuse escalating into federal securities fraud. It was clean, it was documented, and the witness was sitting right in front of her. "If we do this," she said, her voice dropping an octave, "there is no going back. You become a confidential human source. You sign the paperwork. You surrender every text, every email, every recording. And when this goes to trial, you will be the star witness against your own sister. You will destroy your relationship with your family forever. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about the word family. I thought about the way Dad looked at me when I talked about my work. I thought about Mom defending Olivia's theft. I thought about the 3 years of gaslighting, of being told I was crazy for seeing what was right in front of my face. "I am prepared," I said. But saying it in a conference room was different from living it in the dark. The weeks leading up to the transfer were the longest of my life. I barely slept. I would lie in my apartment, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the city outside. The ethical line I was walking felt razor thin. Was I doing this for justice? Or was I just as vindictive as they said I was? I replayed the scenarios in my head. I imagined Olivia in handcuffs. It did not bring me joy. It brought me a sick, heavy feeling in my stomach. I imagined my mother crying. That was harder. Despite everything, the biological imperative to protect the tribe was strong. One Tuesday night, 3 days before the transfer, I almost called it off. I sat with my phone in my hand, Angela's number on the screen. I told myself I could just dissolve Northline. I could tell Olivia I changed my mind. I could move to another city, change my name, and disappear. I could let them win. Then I remembered the Ridgeway invoice. I remembered the 5% rush fee she added. It wasn't just the theft. It was the greed. She hadn't just wanted my money. She wanted more of my money than I had even earned. If I stopped now, she would not stop. She would find another Dylan, maybe a cousin, maybe an intern at her firm, maybe an elderly client. She was a machine that consumed trust and excreted debt. I put the phone down. I chose the cold comfort of the law over the warm lie of the family. The coordination with the SEC was surgical. Angela and I met 2 more times to finalize the timeline. We treated the Sunday dinner like a tactical operation. The transfer happens at 2:47, I told her, pointing to the schedule on the whiteboard. That is when we usually finish the main course. She will want to sign before dessert so she can celebrate. We will be staged 2 streets over, Angela said. We need a signal, a digital handshake. I will call you, I said. I will step out. If I call you and say the phrase, "It is done," that means she has signed and has physical possession of the records. That is the moment the fraud is consummated. We need 10 minutes, Angela said. We need to ensure she has time to transmit the loan application or at least access the server with her new credentials. That establishes intent. I will keep them there, I promised. We discussed the freeze. The SEC had already contacted the risk department at Union Crest Bank. They were aware of the incoming fraudulent application. They agreed to flag it but not reject it immediately, allowing the paper trail to be completed. It was a sting in every sense of the word. The paperwork I signed was extensive. I waived my right to anonymity. I agreed to testify. I acknowledged that my own actions in creating the shell company were protected only by my cooperation agreement and that if I deviated from the plan, I could be liable for conspiracy. You are walking a tightrope. Dylan, Angela told me as I signed the last page. You have to be perfect. If you encourage her, if you push her, the defense will scream entrapment. You have to be passive. You have to be the victim who is just letting it happen. I have been practicing that role my whole life, I said. The night before the Sunday dinner, my phone rang at 11 o'clock. It was Angela. Director? I answered, surprised. She never called that late. I just wanted to check in, she said. Her voice sounded tired, less armored than usual. Pre-game jitters? Something like that, I admitted. I keep wondering if there is another way. Maybe an intervention. Angela sighed. 5 years ago, I had a case in Boston. Similar profile. Older brother was running a Ponzi scheme using his parents' retirement accounts. The younger sister found out. She came to us. We set it up. But at the last minute, she got cold feet. She thought she could talk him out of it. She thought she could fix him with love. I waited in the silence. He drained the accounts 2 weeks later, Angela said softly. The parents lost the house. The dad had a stroke from the stress. And the brother? He fled to a non-extradition country with $2 million. The sister called me a year later. She asked me if I thought it was her fault. What did you tell her? I asked. I told her it was his fault, Angela said. But I knew that didn't help her sleep. Silence is not neutral. Dylan, in the face of a crime, silence is an accomplice. Your sister is going to hurt someone. The only choice you have is whether you let her hurt a stranger or whether you stop her now. That story settled it. The last lingering doubt evaporated. I realized then that I wasn't betraying my family. I was the only one in the family who was actually dealing with reality. They were living in a collective delusion where Olivia was a genius and I was a failure. I was about to pop the bubble. I will be ready, I told Angela. 2:47, be there. We will be there, she said. I hung up and looked at the suit I had laid out for the next day. It was the same cheap, slightly ill-fitting suit I wore to every family gathering to look less successful. I brushed a piece of lint off the lapel. Tomorrow, the actor would retire, and the witness would take the stand. Director Rhodes did not reach for handcuffs. Not yet. She stood in the center of the foyer with the practiced stillness of a predator that knows the chase is already over. The silence in the house was absolute, a vacuum where the air pressure had dropped so low my ears popped. Ms. Bond, Angela said, her voice deceptively polite. We are not placing you under arrest at this exact second. However, you are the primary subject of an active federal investigation into securities fraud and wire fraud. We have a car outside. We would strongly prefer you accompany us to the field office voluntarily for an interview. It looks better for you later if you walk out on your own 2 feet rather than in cuffs. Olivia stood frozen near the coat rack, her knuckles white as she clutched the strap of her designer bag. She looked small. That was the first thing that struck me. How physically small she looked without the armor of her arrogance. She started, her voice cracking. She cleared her throat and tried to summon the ghost of her boardroom persona. I need to call my lawyer. I am not going anywhere without legal counsel. You can call him from the car, Angela said. But we are securing the evidence now. The laptop in your trunk, the phone you dropped, and the documents in that bag. Olivia clutched the bag tighter, a reflex. I stepped forward from the dining room archway. The time for silence was over. The recording was running. But now I needed the jury, my parents, to hear the specifics. I needed them to understand the scale of what their golden child had intended to do. Tell them, Olivia, I said. My voice was calm, cutting through the tension like a scalpel. She whipped her head toward me, her eyes wide and wet. Tell them what? She hissed. Tell Dad how much you were going to borrow, I said. Tell him the number you put on that draft application to Union Crest Bank. Shut up, Dylan, she spat. Was it 1 million? I asked, taking a step closer. 2 million? Or did you get greedy? Did you look at those fake projections I gave you? The ones showing 300% year-over-year growth, and decide to swing for the fences? I said, shut up, she screamed. Director Rhodes? I said, turning to Angela. You have the file. What was the requested loan amount? Angela looked at her tablet, though I knew she didn't need to. She had memorized the case file just as I had. The draft application found in Ms. Bond's sent items, scheduled for transmission tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, requested a revolving line of credit and a term loan totaling $5.2 million. The number hung in the air. $5.2 million. My father, Mark Bond, made a sound like a balloon slowly deflating. He reached out blindly for the nearest chair, a decorative antique chair that no one was ever allowed to sit on, and collapsed into it. The wood creaked under his weight. $5 million? Dad whispered. He looked at Olivia, his eyes unfocused. You told us you were just helping him stabilize the cash flow. You said it was a small restructuring. It is leverage. Daddy, Olivia cried, her defense frantic and shrill. It is how business works. You use the asset to secure liquidity. I was going to invest it. I could have turned that $5 million into $10 million in a year with the market the way it is. I was going to pay the bank back. It wasn't stealing. It was strategy. It was fraud, Angela corrected her. You were using a shell company with zero actual value to secure federally insured funds. If the market turned, or if you simply made a bad bet, the bank would be left holding the bag on a company worth nothing. And since you signed the personal guarantee in the transfer agreement today, you would have been on the hook for every cent. Dad put his head in his hands. You were going to bankrupt us, he mumbled into his palms. If that loan defaulted, they would have come for everything. The house, my retirement, everything. I wouldn't have defaulted, Olivia insisted, stamping her foot like a petulant child. I am smart. I know what I'm doing. You didn't know you were buying a fake company, I pointed out. That stopped her. She stared at me, her mouth open. The logic was inescapable. If she was smart enough to triple the money, she should have been smart enough to realize the asset she was buying was a mirage. Then came the sound I had been dreading, yet expecting. My mother, Linda, who had been sitting on the floor weeping quietly, suddenly stopped. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. She stood up, her movements shaky but determined. She walked over to Olivia and put a hand on her arm, checking her daughter for physical injuries. Then, she turned slowly to face me. Her eyes were not filled with realization. They were filled with betrayal. How could you? she asked. The question hit me in the chest, but I stood my ground. How could I Mom? Stop her from committing a felony? You set a trap for your own sister, Mom said, her voice rising to a tremble. You spent years, lying to us, pretending to be struggling, pretending to be weak, just so you could do this? Just so you could humiliate her in front of strangers? They are not strangers, Mom, I said. They are federal agents. I do not care who they are, she shouted, stepping toward me. You destroyed this family. Look at your father. Look at your sister. You did this. You could have just told her no. You could have just refused to sign the papers. Why did you have to make it a police matter? Because telling her no didn't work, I said. Did it? What are you talking about? 3 years ago, I said, keeping my voice low and dangerous. Ridgeway Systems, $50,000. Do you remember? Mom flinched. I came to you. I continued. I brought you the emails. I showed you the bank account numbers. I told you she was stealing from me. And what did you do? Did you punish her? Did you tell her to stop? That was a misunderstanding, Mom muttered, looking away. You called me a liar, I said. You called me jealous. You told me I should be grateful that she was managing my money. You taught her that she could take whatever she wanted from me, and you would help her hide the body. You taught her she was untouchable. I pointed at the SEC agents. So I brought people who do not care about your feelings. I brought people who only care about evidence. You wanted to protect her from the consequences of her actions? Fine. Try protecting her from the United States government. You are heartless, Mom whispered. I do not even know who you are anymore. I am the person you made, I said. Ryan, who had been standing by the kitchen door looking like he wanted to vanish into the drywall, finally stepped up. He looked pale, sweating through his polo shirt. Okay, look, Ryan said, holding his hands up in a placating gesture. He turned to Angela. Officer, agent, look, this is clearly a family dispute that got out of hand. My brother here, he has a flair for the dramatic. He is upset, but we can work this out. We can tear up the papers, right? Just nullify the contract. Pretend today didn't happen. No harm, no foul. The bank didn't actually send the money yet, right? He looked at me, his eyes pleading. Dylan, tell them you want to drop it. You made your point. You scared her. She learned her lesson. Just call off the dogs. I looked at my brother. He really believed that. He believed that the rules of the Bond household, where everything could be swept under the rug if we just smiled hard enough, applied to the rest of the world. It does not work like that, Ryan, I said. Mr. Bond is correct, Angela interjected, her tone leaving no room for negotiation. This is not a civil suit. This is not a complaint that can be withdrawn. A crime has been committed. The attempt to defraud is the crime. The falsification of records is the crime. Once Ms. Bond signed that transfer and took possession of the materials with the intent to use them for that loan application, the line was crossed. The Department of Justice does not do takebacks. But he is the victim, Ryan argued, pointing at me. If the victim says it is okay, surely. I am not the victim, I said. The victim would have been the bank or the investors she was soliciting. I am just the witness. Ryan stared at me. You won't help her, even now? I am helping her, I said. I am stopping her before she steals $5 million and goes to prison for 20 years instead of 5. Olivia let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. She pulled away from Mom's grip and took a step toward me. Her face was ruined, mascara running in dark streaks down her cheeks, her lips trembling, but her eyes were dry now, and they were burning with a cold, hard hate. You enjoyed this, she whispered. No, I said. I didn't. You did? She insisted. I can see it in your face. You have been waiting for this moment. You sat at this table every Sunday, eating our food, smiling at us, knowing you were wearing a wire. You watched me plan. You watched me work. You never once tried to warn me. You never once said, Hey, Olivia, Those numbers look off. You fed me the poison and watched me eat it. I fed you what you asked for, I said. You asked for a miracle company. I gave you one. You are sick, she said, her voice dropping to a terrifying calm. You think you are some kind of hero? You are a psychopath. You spent 3 years of your life, 3 prime years, obsessing over me, building a fake world just to trap me. Who does that? Normal people do not do that. Dylan, you are broken. You are more broken than I am. Maybe, I said. I felt a strange sense of detachment, as if I were watching the scene from the ceiling. But I am not the one going to federal prison. You think this is over? She hissed. You think you win? You just lost your whole family. Mom and Dad will never forgive you. Ryan will never trust you. You will be alone. You will have your little victory, and you will have your justice, and you will have absolutely no one to share it with. I looked at my parents. Dad was still slumped in the chair, staring at the floor as if the pattern on the rug held the secrets of the universe. Mom was looking at me with a mixture of fear and loathing, like I was a monster she had accidentally invited into her home. Olivia was right. The bridge was not just burned, it was atomized. I know, I said. I let a very small, very sad smile touch my lips. I made that choice a long time ago. Why? She demanded, screaming the word. Why hate me that much? I don't hate you, Olivia, I said softly. I just wanted to make sure that the next time you decided to destroy someone for profit, it wouldn't be me. And I wanted to make sure there wouldn't be a next time. Ms. Bond, Angela said, stepping between us. She placed a hand firmly on Olivia's shoulder. It is time to go. Do not make this harder than it needs to be. Olivia looked at me one last time. It was a look that would be etched into my memory forever. The look of a queen who had just realized her throne was made of cardboard. I hope it was worth it, she said. It was, I answered. She turned and walked toward the door, flanked by the agents. The click of her heels on the hardwood floor sounded like a countdown clock reaching 0. The door opened, letting in a blast of warm afternoon air and the sounds of birds chirping, indifferent to the tragedy unfolding inside. As they stepped out onto the porch, I saw the black sedan waiting in the driveway. Neighbors were starting to come out onto their lawns, drawn by the strange cars and the official-looking people. I stayed in the foyer. I did not follow them out. I did not want to see her get into the car. I turned back to the living room. My mother was sobbing again, a loud, raw sound. My father was still silent. Ryan was pouring himself a drink from the sideboard, his hands shaking so badly the crystal decanter rattled against the glass. I reached into my pocket and turned off the recording. File saved. The silence that followed was deafening. It was the sound of a family that had been held together by lies finally collapsing under the weight of the truth. And I was the one who had pulled the pin. The sound of the front door closing behind the federal agents was not the end. It was the beginning of the vacuum. I stood in the foyer of my childhood home, the echo of Olivia's heels still hanging in the air. My mother, who had been sobbing on the floor moments ago, slowly pulled herself up using the edge of the hallway table. She smoothed her skirt with a trembling hand, her face streaked with tears and mascara. But when she looked at me, her eyes were dry. They were arid. "Get out," she said. It was not a scream. It was not a hysterical demand. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the cold detachment one uses for a solicitor or a trespasser. "Mom," I started, taking a half step forward. "I know this is—" "Do not call me that," she interrupted, her voice cracking like thin ice. "You lost the right to use that word when you sent those people here to take your sister away. You are not my son right now. You are just the person who did this." I looked at my father. Mark Bond was still sitting in the decorative chair, staring at his hands as if they belonged to a stranger. He did not look up. He did not defend me. He did not defend her. He had simply checked out of reality, unable to process a world where his daughter was a criminal and his son was the one who caught her. "Ryan?" I asked, looking at my brother. Ryan turned his back to me, pouring a drink with shaking hands. "Just go," Dylan, seriously, just go before Dad has a heart attack. I nodded. There was nothing else to say. I had prepared for this moment for 3 years. I had rehearsed the arguments, the justifications, the logic, but standing there, facing the absolute wall of their rejection, I realized that logic had no place here. They were mourning the death of a fantasy, and I was the one who had killed it. I picked up my jacket from the rack. I walked out the door. I did not slam it. I closed it gently, hearing the latch click into place with a finality that felt like a bone breaking. I walked to my car, the beat-up Honda Civic I kept specifically to maintain my cover. I sat in the driver's seat for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, waiting for the wave of regret to hit me. I waited for the tears. I waited for the urge to run back inside and beg for forgiveness. But it didn't come. Instead, I felt a strange, buoyant lightness. The weight of the mask I had been wearing, the slouching, stuttering, failure of a son, was gone. I started the engine and drove away from Maplewood. The drive back to downtown Cleveland was a transition between worlds. I watched the manicured lawns and white picket fences fade in the rearview mirror, replaced by the gray industrial sprawl and then the gleaming glass of the city skyline. This was my reality, not the soft, suffocating lies of suburbia, but the hard, cold angles of the city. I drove past my apartment and went straight to the office. Arcadia Forensic Consulting occupied the entire 22nd floor of a steel and glass tower on Superior Avenue. I parked in my reserved spot, not the street parking I used for the Honda usually, but the secure garage. I took the elevator up, the silence of the lift soothing my frayed nerves. When the doors opened, the air smelled like ozone and expensive coffee. This was not Northline Insight Studio with its fake brick walls and rented furniture. This was a war room. The office was quiet, humming with the low energy of a Sunday afternoon shift. A few analysts were tapped into their workstations, bathed in the blue glow of dual monitors. On the wall of the main bullpen, a large digital board tracked active cases, timelines of embezzlement, flowcharts of money laundering schemes, webs of shell companies. This was where I belonged, among the facts. Dylan? I looked up to see Maya Torres, my executive assistant and junior analyst, standing by the coffee machine. She was wearing a hoodie and jeans, holding a tablet. Her eyes went wide when she saw me. "I thought you were deep undercover at the family roast," she said, walking over. "Did it happen? Is it over?" I walked past her toward my office, my real office, with the corner view of Lake Erie and the mahogany desk that I had actually earned. I threw my jacket on the couch and loosened my tie. "It is done," I said. "The SEC picked her up 40 minutes ago. They have the laptop. They have the phone." Maya let out a low whistle. "Damn. I knew it was coming, but hearing it is different. How did the family take it?" "About as well as you would expect," I said, sitting down and waking up my computer. "I am pretty sure I am disowned, legally or emotionally. I am not sure yet, but the locks are definitely getting changed." Maya sat on the edge of my desk, her expression softening. "I am sorry, Dylan. That sucks, even if they deserve it." "It was necessary," I said, typing in my password. "Any movement on the channel?" "Yeah," Maya said, tapping her tablet. "Director Rhodes sent a secure update 10 minutes ago. I was just about to text you." I opened my email client. There it was. A message from Rhodes. Angela, SECENF. Subject: Operation Northline, status update. I clicked it open. The text was sparse and bureaucratic. Subject secure. Electronic devices seized pursuant to warrant. Preliminary search of the suspect's vehicle yielded the laptop containing the shadow ledger as described in your testimony. Union Crest Bank has been notified to freeze the loan application in the queue. We have formally notified the suspect that she is a target of investigation. Initial interview scheduled for tomorrow at 0900 hours. Good work, Bond. I stared at the screen. Good work. It was the validation I had never received from my father. And yet, reading it, I felt a hollow ache in my chest. It wasn't regret, exactly. It was the feeling of looking at a demolished building. You know it had to come down because the foundation was rotten, but you still remember the rooms where you used to live. I minimized the email and opened a subfolder on my encrypted drive. It was labeled simply, Project Family. Inside were hundreds of audio files, organized by date and event. 2022-12, 25, Christmas Dinner. MP3. 2023-04, 14 Dad Birthday. MP 2024-01, 20, Olivia Phone Call. MP3. This was my diary. For 3 years, I had documented every slight, every insult, every moment of coercion. I clicked on one from 6 months ago. The media player opened. I put on my noise-canceling headphones. "You are just dead weight. Dylan." Olivia's voice came through, tinny but clear. "I am the only reason this family has any status. You should be thanking me for even letting you sit at this table." I listened to my own voice responding, weak and pathetic. "I know, Olivia, I am trying." I closed my eyes. That version of me, the one who took the abuse, the one who played the fool, was dead. I had killed him today just as surely as I had killed Olivia's career. I felt a strange sense of mourning for him. He had been a necessary casualty. I took the headphones off and looked out the window. The sun was setting over the lake, casting long, bruised purple shadows across the water. The city lights were flickering on, a grid of electricity and purpose. "You are staring," Maya said gently. She was still sitting there, watching me. "You have that look." "What look?" "The I just nuked my life look," she said. "Do you regret it?" The question hung in the quiet office. Did I regret it? I thought about the $5 million Olivia was about to steal. I thought about the investors she would have defrauded next year, and the year after that. I thought about the way my mother looked at me, not with love, but with the possessiveness of someone who owns a pet. "If you are asking me as a brother," I said slowly, turning my chair to face her, "then yes, there is a part of me that wishes I could have just been the failure they wanted me to be. It would have been easier. We would be eating pie right now." I picked up a pen and clicked it, the sound sharp in the room. "But if you are asking me as an investigator, as the person who swore an oath to find the truth?" I shook my head. "No, I do not regret it. I stopped a predator. The fact that she shares my DNA is a tragedy, but it is not an excuse." Maya nodded. She understood. She had seen enough cases to know that the worst crimes often happen behind the nicest front doors. "Well," she said, standing up, "for what it is worth, I think you are the only sane person in that family." "That is a low bar, Maya," I said with a dry chuckle. "Fair," she smiled. "Oh, by the way, before you spiral into an existential crisis, you should check your external inbox. A request came in an hour ago. It is flagged high priority." "On a Sunday?" I asked, frowning. "It is from the General Counsel of Sterling Hale Industries," Maya said. I sat up straighter. Sterling Hale was a massive conglomerate. Heavy machinery, logistics, defense contracts, they were huge. What do they want with a boutique firm like us? "They specifically asked for you," Maya said. "They read your paper on familial embezzlement and trust structures in the Forensic Journal last month. Apparently, the CEO suspects his son-in-law is cooking the books on their supply chain division, creating fake vendors, inflating costs." I felt a chill run down my spine. Fake vendors, inflating costs, family member. "They want someone who understands the sensitivity of investigating a relative," Maya continued. "They want someone who can be ruthless but discreet. They offered a retainer that is double our usual rate." I looked at the email notification blinking on my screen. Subject: Confidential Inquiry, Internal Audit. Reference: D. Bond. It was almost poetic. The pain I had endured, the 3 years of psychological torture I had subjected myself to in order to catch Olivia. It wasn't just waste. It was market research. It was training. I had become the world's leading expert on betraying your family for the greater good. I opened the email. The details were different. a supply chain instead of a consulting firm, a son-in-law instead of a sister. But the pattern was the same, the arrogance, the assumption that blood would protect them from scrutiny. I felt the last vestiges of the sad brother melt away, replaced by the cold, clear focus of the investigator. My family had cast me out, but in doing so, they had given me a career that no amount of MBA degrees could buy. They had given me the eyes to see what others were too afraid to look at. "Draft a reply," I told Maya, my voice firm. "Tell them I am available. Tell them I have extensive experience with this specific profile." "You want to take it? Tonight?" Maya asked. "You do not want to go home and drink a bottle of whiskey?" "I am already home," I said, gesturing to the office, to the files, to the truth. "And I do not drink when I am working." I looked back at the folder labeled Project Family. I hesitated for a second, then right-clicked on it. Move to Archive Closed Cases. The file bar filled up green and disappeared. It was done. "Let us get to work," I said. The silence I had found in my office did not last long. In the week following the raid, my phone became a physical source of anxiety, vibrating across my mahogany desk with a frequency that suggested mechanical failure. But it was not a glitch. It was Daniel Cross. Daniel Cross was a partner at one of Cleveland's most expensive defense firms. He was the kind of lawyer who wore Italian silk suits and smiled with all his teeth. The kind of man my parents hired when they wanted a problem to disappear quietly. He was now Olivia's shield. He did not start with threats. He started with the velvet glove. I let his calls go to voicemail for 2 days. On Wednesday morning, I finally picked up. I was sitting in my office at Arcadia, a fresh cup of black coffee in hand, my recording software already running on the desktop. "Dylan," Daniel's voice came through, smooth as aged bourbon. "I am so glad we finally connected. I have been worried about you. Your mother tells me you have not been home." "I am at work, Daniel," I said, keeping my tone flat. "What can I do for you?" "It is not about what you can do for me, son. It is about what we can do for this family," he said. He used the word we like a weapon. "Look, I have reviewed the initial filings from the SEC. It is aggressive, but we both know how these government types are. They like to throw the book to see what sticks." "They have the evidence, Daniel," I said. "They have an interpretation of the evidence," he corrected, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "But you and I know the truth. Olivia is ambitious, maybe a little careless. She trusted the wrong data. She was under immense pressure at her firm. It was a lapse in judgment, not a criminal conspiracy. She drafted a loan application for $5.2 million based on revenue that didn't exist," I said. "That is not a lapse. That is wire fraud." "Technically, yes," Daniel said, dismissing the felony with a sigh. "But think about the optics. Dylan, do you really want to see your sister in federal prison? Do you want to see her in an orange jumpsuit? Think about your mother. This is killing her." "I did not tell Olivia to break the law," I said. "No, but you certainly held the door open for her," Daniel said, the velvet slipping just a little. "Here's the thing. Dylan, the SEC needs a cooperating witness to make the intent charge stick. Without your testimony, without those recordings you claim to have, it becomes a much muddier case. It becomes a case of a sister trying to save her brother's failing business and making a mistake with the paperwork." I leaned back in my chair. "Are you asking me to destroy evidence, Daniel?" "Goodness, no," he laughed, a dry, hollow sound. "I am suggesting that perhaps your memory of those conversations is flexible. Perhaps you realize that some of those recordings were taken out of context. Maybe you decide not to authenticate them. If you soften your stance. If we can present Olivia as a woman suffering from severe professional burnout who made a bad call, we can plead this down to a misdemeanor, a fine, probation, no jail time." I looked at the waveform on my computer screen, bouncing in time with his voice. "You want me to lie to federal agents," I said. "I want you to help your family heal," he countered. "We can make sure you are taken care of. Dylan, Olivia still has assets. We could set up a trust. Compensation for your distress. I will think about it, I said. Good man, Daniel said, thinking he had won. We are all on the same team here. I hung up. I immediately exported the audio file, labeled it Exhibit Attempted Tampering Cross, and sent it via encrypted email to Angela Rhodes. 10 minutes later, Angela replied with 2 words. Keep talking. It was another layer of the trap. They thought they were negotiating with a hurt brother. They didn't realize they were negotiating with an operative who was documenting their every attempt to subvert justice. But the pressure didn't just come from the suits. It came from the blood. Ryan called me on Thursday night. He didn't sound like the arrogant investment banker anymore. He sounded young and scared. You have to stop. Dylan, he said. He was crying. I just got off the phone with Dad. He was asking about second mortgages. He thinks he has to pay for Olivia's legal fees. He is talking about selling the house. He does not have to pay, I said. Olivia is an adult. She has her own money. Her assets are frozen, Ryan shouted. You know that. You did that. Dad is going to ruin himself trying to save her. And Mom is barely eating. Listen, I do not care about Olivia right now. Screw her. But keep Mom and Dad out of the report. Please. I closed my eyes, pinching the bridge of my nose. This was the one weak point in my armor. I tried, Ryan, I said softly. And I had, 2 days ago, in a sterile conference room at the SEC, I had sat across from Angela and pushed the same agenda. We do not need the tapes of my parents. I had told her. They didn't commit the fraud. They just enabled her. It is humiliating, but it is not criminal. I want to redact their names from the public filing. Angela had looked at me with that pitying, steel-eyed gaze. Context is everything. Dylan, the defense is going to argue that Olivia was entrapped. They are going to argue that you masterminded this to hurt her, to prove otherwise. We need to show the environment. We need to show that the pressure came from them, not you. We need the jury to hear your mother telling you to give the company to Olivia. We need to hear your father calling you incompetent. It establishes why you built the trap in the first place. If we pull those tapes, we weaken the case against Olivia. So they have to be collateral damage? I had asked. They chose their side, Angela had replied. I cannot do it. Ryan, I told my brother now. The files are already processed. The court needs the whole truth. You are a bastard, Ryan whispered. You are actually enjoying watching us burn. I am not, I said, but he had already hung up. The next afternoon, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. Coffee shop on 4th and Vine, 3 o'clock. Please, Mom. I stared at the screen for 5 minutes. It was a tactical risk. Meeting a witness, or a potential hostile witness, without counsel was dangerous. But it was my mother. I went. The cafe was small, smelling of roasted beans and damp raincoats. It was raining outside, a gray, relentless Cleveland drizzle. I saw her in the back booth. She looked 10 years older than she had on Sunday. Her posture, usually rigid with social grace, was slumped. She was stirring a cup of tea she hadn't touched. I sat down opposite her. Hello, Mom, I said. She looked up. Her eyes were rimmed with red. She didn't offer a greeting. She just reached across the table and took my hand. Her grip was cold. She is terrified. Dylan, Mom whispered. I went to see her at her apartment. She is pacing the floor. She is talking about suicide. I didn't pull my hand away, but I didn't squeeze back. She is manipulating you, Mom. That is what she does. She is your sister, Mom hissed, a flash of the old fire returning. She made a mistake. She got greedy. I admit that. I know she is not. I know she isn't perfect. But prison, federal prison, for a financial crime? It is too much. You have to tell them it was a misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding, I said. How can you be so sure? She pleaded. Maybe she didn't mean to send the application. Maybe she was just testing the waters. I pulled my phone out. I had prepared for this. I knew that words wouldn't work on Linda Bond. She could rationalize away any sentence I spoke, but she couldn't rationalize Olivia's own voice. "I want you to listen to something," I said. "This was recorded 3 weeks ago. Olivia was on the phone with her friend from business school. She didn't know I was in the next room recording." "I do not want to hear your spy tapes," Mom said, pulling back. "You need to," I said. "If you want to understand why I am not stopping this, you need to hear this." I pressed play and set the phone on the table between the sugar bowl and the napkin holder. The audio was crisp. "Olivia, I am telling you, Jessica, it is free money. The idiot has zero idea what the valuation is. I am going to pump the revenue projections to $5 million, secure the line of credit from Union Crest, and then use the capital to pay off my margin calls at the firm." Jessica on tape: "What about the business? Doesn't he have staff?" Olivia: "Who cares? I will restructure it, fire the freelancers, strip the assets, and declare bankruptcy on the LLC in 18 months if I have to. The bank writes it off. I keep the liquidity. And Dylan goes back to working at a Kinko's. It is clean." Jessica: "That is brutal. Liv." Olivia: "It is business. He is a loser. Jess, I am doing him a favor by putting him out of his misery." Olivia laughed on the tape. It was a bright, happy laugh, the laugh of someone who had just won a game. I stopped the recording. The silence in the cafe was heavy. My mother was staring at the phone as if it were a venomous snake. Her mouth was slightly open. She looked pale, almost green. "She wasn't stressed, Mom," I said gently. "She wasn't confused. She was planning to bankrupt the company, fire people, and leave me with the wreckage. She called me a loser. She laughed about it." Linda looked up at me. For the first time in my life, I saw the veil lift. I saw her look at me and actually see me. Not the project, not the disappointment, but the man who had outsmarted the predator she had raised. She said she was doing it for your future," Mom whispered. Her voice was broken. "She was doing it for her margin calls," I said. "She has gambling debts. Mom, that is where the money was going." Linda closed her eyes. A single tear tracked through her powder. She took a long, shuddering breath. "I do not know when you became a grown-up, Dylan," she said softly. "I missed it. I was so busy watching her. I missed you completely." "I had to grow up fast," I said. "It is okay." "No," she said, opening her eyes. "It is not okay. But I cannot help you." I stiffened. "What?" "I cannot testify against her," she said, her voice gaining a fragile resolve. "I cannot sit in court and help them put my daughter in a cage. I know she is guilty. I hear it. But she is my daughter. If you make me choose, Dylan, I have to choose the one who is drowning. You can swim. You proved that." It was a rejection, but it was a different kind of rejection. It was an admission of my strength. She was abandoning me because I didn't need her, and saving Olivia because Olivia was broken. "I understand," I said. I stood up. I put the phone back in my pocket. "I won't ask you to testify, but do not ask me to stop." "I won't," she said. She didn't look at me as I walked away. The final blow came 2 days later, not from my mother, but from the legal machine. Ryan forwarded me an email he had received from Daniel Cross. The subject line was "Potential Defense Strategy, Narrative Control." The email outlined a scorched earth media strategy. If I didn't accept the plea deal, Cross was preparing to leak a story to the press. The narrative was simple. Dylan Bond was a mentally unstable, jealous brother who had spent years gaslighting his successful sister, planting evidence, and manufacturing a crime to destroy her reputation. They were going to paint me as the villain of a psychological thriller, the obsessed stalker who framed the innocent executive. He has a history of resentment. The email read, "We can use his forensic background to argue that he is a professional manipulator. We will destroy his credibility before he even takes the stand." I read the email in my office. Maya was standing behind me, reading over my shoulder. "They are going to play dirty," Maya said. "They are going to drag your name through the mud. You might lose clients. Sterling Hale might back out if you become a media circus. I smiled. It was a cold smile. Let them try, I said. They are forgetting one thing. What is that? I didn't just record the crime, I said, opening my email to send a reply to Angela. I recorded the cover-up. I have Cross on tape offering me a bribe. I have the audio of him asking me to destroy evidence. I attached the file Exhibit Attempted Tampering Cross to the email chain and CC'd Ryan. If they want to make this about character, I said, hitting send, I will show the world exactly who they are. The phone rang 2 minutes later. It was Ryan. I didn't answer. I just watched it ring, knowing that the game had shifted. They weren't hunting me anymore. They were realizing, too late, that they were locked in the room with me. The conference room at the regional office of the Securities and Exchange Commission was colder than my parents' dining room, but the seating arrangement was eerily similar. It was a long, rectangular table made of polished synthetic wood. On one side sat the government, Angela Rhodes, 2 junior investigators, and a prosecutor from the Department of Justice named Miller. On the other side sat the defense, Olivia, looking smaller than I had ever seen her in a gray cardigan that seemed designed to elicit sympathy, and Daniel Cross, whose Italian suit looked out of place under the harsh fluorescent lights. I sat at the head of the table. I was not the accused, and I was not the prosecution. I was the architect. Let us begin, Angela said, tapping her tablet. The screen in the center of the room flickered to life. This is an informal proffer session prior to the filing of formal charges. We are here to establish the timeline of events regarding the acquisition and attempted leveraging of Northline Insight Studio. She looked at me. Mr. Bond, please walk us through the asset. I cleared my throat. My voice was steady. I had rehearsed this testimony in the shower, in my car, and in my dreams for 3 years. Northline Insight Studio was incorporated in Delaware 3 years ago, I began. It was structured as a legitimate limited liability company. However, from its inception, it conducted zero legitimate commerce. It had no clients. It had no revenue. It had no proprietary technology. All financial statements, including the profit and loss sheets showing a gross revenue of $400,000 last year, were fabricated by me using standard accounting software. And the purpose of this fabrication? Miller, the prosecutor, asked. He was writing on a yellow legal pad, not looking up. To test the integrity of the subject, Olivia Bond, I said, and to create a controlled environment where specific patterns of financial fraud could be observed. Daniel Cross leaned forward. He didn't look like the smooth negotiator on the phone anymore. He looked like a man trying to stop a dam from bursting with his bare hands. Objection to the characterization, Daniel said sharply. Mr. Bond admits to creating a fraudulent entity. He admits to falsifying documents. He then presented these documents to my client, his own sister, and represented them as real. This is not a test of integrity. This is entrapment. He built a trap and shoved her into it. I did not shove anyone, I said, turning to face him. I left the door unlocked. Olivia walked in, looked around, saw a pile of fake money, and decided to steal it. She was trying to help you. Daniel slammed his hand on the table. She signed those papers to save her brother from bankruptcy. Is that why she drafted a loan application for $5.2 million? I asked. I slid a piece of paper across the table. It was the printout of the email draft found on Olivia's seized laptop. This was created at 8 a.m. on Sunday, I said. 6 hours before she signed the transfer agreement. She hadn't even bought the company yet, and she was already trying to borrow $5 million against it. She wasn't saving me. She was using my name as collateral. Olivia flinched as if I had slapped her. She refused to meet my eyes. She was staring at the table, picking at a loose thread on her sleeve. This is circumstantial, Daniel argued, though his voice lacked conviction. Drafting a document is not a crime. She never sent it. Because we stopped her, Angela interjected. But we have something else. Mr. Bond, play Exhibit C? I reached for the laptop connected to the room's audio system. I opened the file. It was a recording from the Sunday dinner. specifically the moment Ryan and Olivia were whispering in the kitchen while I was supposedly in the bathroom. The audio filled the room. Ryan's voice. "Are you sure this is safe, Liv? Dylan is an idiot. But if the bank audits the books..." Olivia's voice. "The bank does not audit under 10 million if the credit score is prime. I checked. I will get the loan, pay off my personal debts, and then we will restructure Northline. We will declare insolvency in 18 months. Dylan's name is on the history, so he takes the reputational hit, but I keep the cash. It is perfect." Ryan's voice. "Jesus, that is cold. But, okay, if you are sure." I stopped the recording. The silence in the room was absolute. Daniel Cross closed his eyes. He knew. In that 10-second clip, his entire defense strategy, the good sister helping a bad brother narrative, had evaporated. But the real devastation was in the corner of the room. Ryan had been allowed to attend as a potential character witness. Now, he was sitting against the wall, his face the color of ash. He realized that his voice was on the tape. He realized he hadn't just been a bystander. He had been a co-conspirator. He had known, and he had said nothing. "That establishes intent," Miller said, circling something on his pad. "And it establishes conspiracy. She wasn't just negligent, she was predatory. She planned to defraud the bank and frame the previous owner, her brother, for the collapse." Angela looked at Olivia. "Ms. Bond, do you have anything to say?" Olivia looked up. Her face was a ruin of tears and smudged makeup. The arrogance that had defined her for 30 years was gone, replaced by a terrified, childish vulnerability. "I just wanted to fix it," she whispered. Her voice trembled. I have debts. The market turned against me. I lost money. My own money. The firm's money. I was scared. I didn't want Mom and Dad to know I was failing. They think I'm perfect. I just needed a bridge. Just one loan to get back on top. I would have paid it back." "You were going to frame your brother," Angela said coldly. "He is used to failing," Olivia cried out, a sudden burst of hysterical energy. "It wouldn't have hurt him. He is just a freelancer. But I have a reputation. I have a career. I couldn't lose everything." "So you decided to sacrifice him," Angela said. "That is the definition of financial predation." Olivia put her head on the table and sobbed. It was a loud, ugly sound. It wasn't the cry of someone who was sorry for what they did. It was the cry of someone who was sorry they got caught. The prosecutor, Miller, cleared his throat. He looked at Daniel Cross. "Here is the situation, Counselor," Miller said. "We have the wire fraud. We have the securities fraud. We have the conspiracy. We have the audio confessions. If we go to trial, I will put Dylan Bond on the stand, and I will play every single one of those tapes for the jury. She will get 15 years, minimum." Daniel Cross looked at Olivia, then at Miller. "What is the offer?" "She pleads guilty to 1 count of wire fraud," Miller said. "Full allocution. She surrenders her license to trade. She pays restitution for the investigative costs. We recommend 36 months in federal prison. With good behavior, she is out in 2. 3 years, Olivia wailed. "I cannot go to prison. I am Olivia Bond." "Not anymore," Angela said. "Now, you are inmate number whatever the Bureau of Prisons assigns you." Daniel Cross turned to me. His eyes were desperate. He knew he had no leverage left. "Dylan," he said, "please, she is your sister. 3 years is a lifetime. Can you speak to the prosecutor? Tell them you do not support a custodial sentence. Tell them you just want probation. If the victim asks for leniency, they usually listen." I looked at Olivia. She was looking at me, her eyes pleading, begging for the brother she had spent her life tormenting to save her one last time. I thought about the Ridgeway contract. I thought about the $50,000 she stole. I thought about the way she laughed on the tape, calling me a loser. I thought about the $5 million she was ready to steal from the bank. If I saved her now, she would never learn. She would just learn that she could get away with anything as long as she cried hard enough. "I am not the victim," I said, my voice echoing in the quiet room. The victim is the truth, and I support the truth. I stood up. I have provided all the evidence, I said to Angela. I am done here. Dylan, Olivia screamed as I turned my back. Dylan, please, do not leave me here. Mom will never forgive you. I kept walking. I walked past Daniel Cross, who was slumped in defeat. I walked past Ryan, who couldn't even look me in the eye because he knew he was next on the interview list. I pushed open the heavy doors of the conference room and walked out into the hallway. The air in the corridor felt lighter, the crushing weight of the last 3 years, the secrets, the lies, the acting, was gone. I walked through the security checkpoint, handed in my visitor badge, and stepped out onto the street. The Cleveland sky was gray, but to me, it looked bright. The noise of the traffic sounded like music. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a number from New York. This is Bond, I answered. Mr. Bond, a crisp voice said. This is the General Counsel for Sterling Hale Industries. We received your confirmation. We are prepared to move forward with the internal audit of our supply chain division. The CEO is very anxious to get started. When can you begin? I looked back at the federal building. Somewhere on the 4th floor, my sister was being fingerprinted. My family was shattered. My past was a smoking crater. But I looked forward, at the city skyline, at the towers full of glass and steel and secrets waiting to be uncovered. I can start immediately, I said. I know exactly where to look. I hung up the phone and started walking down the avenue, my stride long and purposeful. I knew my mother would never speak to me again. I knew my father would curse my name. I knew I would be the villain in their story forever. But as I merged into the crowd of strangers, I realized something. I didn't care about their story anymore. I had written my own. This wasn't just revenge. This was accountability. And if justice has to start with your own blood, then so be it. I would not retreat. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It was a long journey from that dining table to the federal courthouse, and I appreciate you walking it with me. I would love to hear where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from your office, your car, or maybe your own family dinner? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please make sure to subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button so we can share this warning with as many people as possible. Stay safe, and remember, check your books.